सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को नमस्कार। और हमारे साथ आज के स्पीकर प्रोफेसर रवि प्रोवई सर, इंडस्ट्रियल डिजाइन सेंटर आईआईटी बॉम्बे मुंबई से। सर हमारे मेंटर है और हमारे जैसे बहुत सारे टीचर्स के, स्टूडेंट्स के, सबके मेंटर्स हैं। और सर आज हम लोगों को, जैसा कि आप सभी को मालूम है कि हम लोग सोशल डिजाइन, फंडामेंटल ऑफ सोशल डिजाइन के ऊपर हमारा ये कोर्स चल रहा है, जिसके सेकंड मॉड्यूल में आज हम लोग क्लास करने जा रहे हैं। जो ये पूरा वीक ह्यूमन सेंटर्ड डिजाइन अप्रोचेज के थ्रू जो सोशल डिजाइन की रिलेवेंस है, इस पे हम लोग बात करेंगे डिफरेंट स्पीकर्स के साथ। आज हमारे साथ प्रोफेसर रवि पुवई सर हैं। सर आज हम लोगों को यूजर सेंट्रिक और ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक डिजाइन एज ए प्रोसेस फॉर सोशल डिजाइन के एस्पेक्ट्स में एक्सप्लोर करेंगे चीजों को, कि कैसे सोशल डिजाइन में इन रिलेवेंस में चीजें होती हैं और ह्यूमन सेंटर्ड होकर जब डिजाइन बनाई जाती है तो उसका समाज पे किस तरीके का प्रभाव पड़ता है। मैं सर का फिर से स्वागत करता हूं, सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स का भी, और सर से रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि सर अपनी बात को कहें। सर दोनों लैंग्वेज चलेगी, कभी कभी बीच में अगर हिंदी पॉसिबल हो तो, नहीं तो कंफर्ट है किसी तरीके की दिक्कत। प्लीज सर, स्टार्ट योर सर।
Yeah, thank you so much, Manish. So welcome all to all the participants. Hope you're all keeping fine. Okay, so I'm going to speak on user-centered design. Okay, so let me share the screen. Just 1 second. Yeah, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, you're able to see the screen, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to speak on user-centered design. So I'm looking at it as a process for social design. User-centered design is a process for everything. Okay, so I think this is the part 1 in the series. So again, welcome all of you to this particular talk. So I'm going to start with the bigger picture, the macro level picture of this. Okay, so we look at what are the different perspectives of social design. So first, if you look at it, you need to have thoughts on design itself. Okay, so it could be the science of design or the way design has evolved through history. And I think you had inputs on both the counts. The science has to do with its logic, its reasoning, okay, how we can actually apply it. Yeah, so this is one perspective of that, okay, and we need to understand this, okay, as a student of design. The next perspective is very, very important and dear to social design. These are the concerns that design needs to answer. So it is the context in which this happens, the society, the culture it forms, okay, and also the respect for nature and the environment. Okay, so these are the big design concerns, at least for present right now, okay, that we need to be bothered. And see, you're actually talking about social design now, okay, which is a very good thing, because it's in the right moment that we have all these concerns and we are putting it together. And the third, the point of view or the perspective is how actually one practices design, okay? And for one to practice design, one has to learn also what is design. So you need to know its principles, the methods, the processes, and you need to become master of the tools through which you can practice design. Okay, so if it is product design, you probably learn about material processes. If you're a communication designer, you'll actually learn about medias and techniques. Yeah, if you're an animation designer, you'll know about the moving image, right? So you need these principles, methods, and tools to finally practice, okay? So what we'll do is we'll do a very simple exercise. So we are looking at a very broad picture, and the focus is on design practice. In that sense, the person, how you're practicing becomes a very important thing in this, and who are you practicing it for? That's the bigger question that we are answering. Okay, so to answer this question, what I thought we'll do is that we'll actually look at what well-known designers have to say in this regard. Okay, So I start with Leonardo da Vinci. We all know he is a great painter, of course, scientist, writer. Yeah, and yeah, he did great works. Okay, and he says simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So he's actually trying to abstract the principles of visuals to be something that is very simple to comprehend. So that's one of the principles he talks about. His paintings are very complex, but at the structural level, they're very simple. I think that's what he means. Okay, and we have this famous architect, Ms. Van der Rohe, and he made this very profound statement: if you can do with less, actually it becomes more. So less is more. Okay, very Gandhian philosophy. It's an attitude to design. Okay, so that means don't waste materials, don't waste energy, be efficient. Yeah, so these are the takeaways from his point of view. Okay, Paul Rand, we've heard of him before, the person who designed the IBM logo and so many other stuff. Okay, and he says design can be art, design can be aesthetics. Design is so simple, that is why it's so complicated. Okay, so at the root of it, it can be simple, but to understand it, you go through a very complex process. Okay, and he makes the connection here. You know, design can also be an art. Yeah, design can also have the form and the looks of it, right? Okay, so we have Professor Nadkarni from here. He studied at the Ulm School of Design. He's the founder of the school I teach in, IDC School of Design. And he says the essentials of design are these: purity, precision, and details. Okay, I mean, these are fine qualities. Yeah, so that means that it has to be truthful, it has to be very, very clear on what you're doing. And, uh, the devil is in the details, right? Yeah. So if you don't get the details right, the design doesn't come right. Okay. So again, another architect, okay, during the 1900s made this profound statement that there's a connection between what an object looks like and what it actually does. Okay, so the form actually follows function. This is a very nice statement he made. And Frank Lloyd Wright, who's also an architect, makes another point of view. Okay, he says that it's not just that form follows function. Okay, its form and functions show so much should be integrated, almost in a spiritual union. You cannot have form without function. They are almost simultaneously. You have to design such that you can't do one with the other. Okay, so the modern movement connected these two functionalities, that the looks of it and what it does was very nicely, as he said, spiritually connected together. Okay, and this is Walter Gropius, the person who started Bauhaus, the founder of Bauhaus. And he put the qualities of the artist and the craftsman together. And now we know that's what is called as design. So the designer has to have both these qualities together. And that was actually, somehow when you went through the course at Bauhaus, that is what you learned from them. And John Maida, who was the president of Rhode Island School of Design, he previously was at MIT, uh, and he said that design is a solution to a problem, but very interestingly, he says art is a question to a problem. Okay, so now design is about solving problems. Yeah, that is very, very essential here. Okay, and Saul Bass, again, a profound, prolific designer, graphic designer. He says design is thinking made visual. So there's a connection between what you have as a thought process and how finely it assumes an applied purpose, okay, in terms of form. Okay, so there's a connection between the two. Again, very nice statements. Okay, design is more than just a few tricks to the eye. It's a few tricks to the brain itself. He's a typographer, Neville Brody. Again, very nicely said that thinking is very important There's thought behind what you are supposed to do. Okay, and Frank Shimura here says that don't ignore people. People would ignore your design then. People ignore design, that ignores people. Okay, very simple statement, but again, something that you can keep at the back of your mind, that who are you designing it for? Okay, so another statement, want your users to fall in love with your designs, then fall in love with your users. So you cannot do it without them, because one and the other are actually very nicely connected together. You need to remember this. Okay. And user research is actually the way by which designer is able to step into the shoes of the user and go along his or her path, feeling all the stones on the way. Okay. So that means he's actually talking about it as an activity which happens over a period of time, and you learn, or unlearn when you go along this process. This is how design is practiced. Again, it's from a studio. Okay, and Alan Fletcher, founder of Pentagram, a very well-known graphic design firm from UK. Design is not a thing that you do; it's actually a way of life itself. Okay, so he says that, of course, design, you become emotional, you get involved in it. Okay, and yeah, it can be a way of life. Yeah, so very nice ways of looking at it. Okay, Paul Klee, who taught at Bauhaus, says that one eye sees and the other feels. So he's connecting the act of seeing to your emotion itself. Okay, so thought and emotion are interconnected here in this act. And Robert Peters, a graphic designer from Canada, says design creates culture, culture shapes values, values determine the future. So important for social design. If you look at it, design creates culture, culture shapes values, values determine the future. Yeah. And here we have Steve Jobs from Apple. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. So it's not just enough if it looks good, but it has to actually work also. So function and form, okay, and the emotion it connotes are all very nicely connected together. Okay, and Picasso here, who's actually tried out so many different things, always ready to learn. He says this, I'm always doing that which I cannot do in order that I may learn how to do it. Yeah, again, very nicely said. It's all about creativity. It's actually trying out the unknown. You're actually taking a path where you might actually find an answer to it, but you need to explore, experiment, try out options. That's the statement here. And Charles Eames, who was profoundly important in terms of the history of the present day design, at least in India. Yeah, so design is a plan for arranging elements in such a way as best to accomplish a particular purpose. So the purpose and design and the arrangement of it is connected together. So that means there is a planning involved. Okay, there is a process involved. Okay, and then you can achieve what you want to do. Okay, good design. Again, Paul Rand here. Good design is the result of a process. So he also talks about the process. The designer does not begin with some preconceived ideas. Rather, the idea is the result of a careful study and observation, and the design a product of that particular idea. Okay, so he's talking about that you need to actually observe. It starts with observation, then studies of it. Okay, and then only actually can you actually think of an idea to do a product. Okay, so uh, Donald Roman, he's written a lot of books, very nice books. Okay, and yeah, so design is more than how it looks. Design is concerned with how things work, which is what Steve Jobs also said, how things are controlled and the nature of interaction between people and technology. This is a very nice statement. So he talks about that there is people interact with technology and you need to be careful about how you make that happen. So when it is done well, the results are brilliant and pleasurable products. That means that you enjoy those products. You kind of like those products. Dieter Rams, I think you've seen some of his works before. German designer, principal designer at Braun. Okay, and his statement is profoundly nice. Good design is honest. Okay, he means that you need to be truthful in what you're trying to do. Truthful to the form, truthful to the materials, truthful to the process, truthful to the person who actually uses your product. Again, extremely nice, simple, statement that you've done. So is the statement from Massimo, uh, who was a perfectionist and also a minimalist. Okay. And what he did, in fact, has lasted such a long time that people are unwilling to do any changes to it. It's like, you got a perfect score, right? It's almost like that. So he says that if you do it right, it will actually last forever. Okay, so that's something statement profoundly important in terms of in with respect to sustainability. When you know that so many things are just changed for the sake of change, yeah, so I think he didn't believe in that. That he said that you have to do it right, get it right for that particular context and time and relevance. Okay, so let's try to sum it up. If it was an physical class, I would have asked you to throw up words that you've learned till now, but I'm going to put it together here. We looked at the user. A lot of them talked about it. They have to have a good experience. There was also mention of the sustainability and the environment in which it happens. So you need to show respect to the environment that you're here. We've not been doing it, and you've seen repercussions of that, right? A lot of them talked about the form and aesthetics. Also, along with the form, many of them also talked about the function it needs to denote. Okay, and yeah, you had statements about the process, and you put together a process such that you can make something which was not there before. Okay, it means that the existing mindset is reframed in some context, like the way Picasso said, he actually learns from these experimentations or explorations. And we also know they said that it's a process of solving problems, and you actually try to find needs and seek opportunities for solving this. We can actually put headings for this. So it's the user, the environment. These are all very, very important aspects for design. Form and function. There's a big relationship between the two. We did see that creativity and innovation plays a very, very dominant role in the process of design. And lastly, there's actually a method and a process to it. Okay, so I'm just reiterating it in a different form, and in terms of 4 quadrants. It's easy to remember. Okay, so you in one quadrant you have the user and the environment, the concern for environment. Okay, when you do design, you have to deal with form and the function, and it's also has to do with creativity and innovation. That's the 3rd quadrant, and the 4th quadrant is the method and process. Okay, so if you look at it, we are actually come from looking at a bigger picture to understanding what is design, and we'll slowly go up, into a bit more detail into understanding what this user is in this whole process of design. Okay, so slowly we'll get into understanding the user. Before we do that, we look at what are the different methods in which design is actually solved. Okay, so let's ask a few questions. Why design? Okay, so if you look at it, it has come as answers in the evolution, examples of evolution that you saw before. You saw that design is concerned about life, okay, and it is concerned about the society, and for social design, that's a very, very, both of them are very, very important concerns. It's also about the environment in which we live, the nature. Okay, so these are the big questions. Why do you need design? It has to answer these questions. Okay, and how do we do it? Yeah, we do it in making use of many things. Okay, so I've used the word appropriate. It's a very important criteria because people have not done it. They've many times disappropriately used these ingredients. But design is appropriate use of communication. It's when technology came in, design also came in, so you need to use it again appropriately. And again, it has to be an honest use of materials itself. So communication, technology, and materials are very, very key elements of how design is actually practiced. Okay, and what do we design it for? These are again important questions. Okay, and you saw that early on Bauhaus or Ulm School, uh, they designed it for a certain purpose, right? And it had to serve certain use. This is also what the crafts period did. The craftsmen very laboriously, you know, did something which his user can actually make use of it, and the user gave him feedback so that he can improve it over a period of time. That's how the symbiotic relationship went on. Okay, and when the machine came in, that relationship between the user and what he was producing got broken, and the focus came onto technology. Okay, and when a society had lots of money to spend on, marketing became a key element. Okay, the marketing people said, we can sell anything on this earth. Yeah. And if you can sell it right, there'll be enough takers for it. Okay, so the focus shifted to marketing. And then interestingly, the internet came and the world became one and the markets increased all over the world. And they realized it's not so easy to do it either with just technology or with marketing because users in many parts of the world are very discriminating, okay, and discerning also. So they realize that, oh, they're actually asking questions. Why do they need this? Okay. To put a simple answer here, it was like McDonald's coming to India, right? And everywhere else where they put through marketing, uh, all that, they do extremely well. But in India, for some reason, it's not multiplied. You don't find McDonald's on every streets of Mumbai or Delhi or Calcutta or metros or even in smaller places, right? Yeah, the reason here is that we have our own taste, okay, and to get used to another taste, it's not that easy. You can't just do it through marketing. You have to do it very culturally. If McDonald's doesn't become part of the Indian culture, there's no way Indian, people would go and make McDonald's their home food. Okay, so that's the difference here. Okay, so sir came such that they had to understand who these people are, what the tastes are, right? That's the big question. So we are slowly moving from purpose to technology to marketing to users. Okay, I'll take you through a few classic examples. This is the former president of Sony. He realized that in Japan, typically lots of commuters between two cities, Osaka and Tokyo. It's a 3 hour drive. So actually, they take 3 hours to come from Osaka to Tokyo. And in the evening, after they work, they take 3 hours back to get to their homes. Okay, so they typically have actually 6 hours to spend on the train. Okay, which is also if you stay on the far corners of Mumbai, you do that. It takes about 2.5 hours to reach home every day. So they take 2 hours, and for that there are quite a lot of trains which start early morning in Pune. All these people come to Bombay to work, but they go home in the evening back to Pune. Similar, conditions exist in many parts of the world. He said that. Can I actually think of something for these users to do? Okay, so he thought of actually, what if they had music that they can carry, okay, and they can actually play it during this time. The batteries would last 3 hours. So when they get to the other place, they can recharge those batteries. So even on the journey back home, they can actually listen to it. That means you need a system which can actually play it, which you can hear it. Okay, and that's how the Sony Walkman was born. In fact, Sony didn't even have the technology. They actually bought the technology from Philips because Philips used to sell something called as a dictaphone, which was a small, dictating machine, which was given to the secretaries to record conversations or dictations. Okay, so they adopted the technology, put in a very nice system so that you can hear it using speakers into your ears, and the Sony was born. And probably you guys are not part of this, Velu, but when we were young, Walkman was something like the mobile in those days, okay? And yeah, they produced it in millions, and it was one of their very successful products. Okay, what is the connection to social design? We'll think about it. And music is also very social, but I'm not making that connection. These are examples where the user was very important. Okay, so is the very nice story behind Nano. Okay, so Ratan Tata used to see a typical Indian family going on a two-wheeler, father and mother with kids in the front, kids in between, kids in hands. Okay, it looks very unsafe, right? Riding, in the Indian roads. Okay, and he said, can I actually give them a vehicle which is actually, safe and which is also not that expensive, and maybe a little bit more than the scooter one needs to invest in, but it will be sound. So they actually went on a big re-engineering spree, into questioning everything that needs to go into a car to make it, energy efficient, material efficient. Okay, if there are 4 screws to fix the wheels, can I use only 3 of them? Okay, so these were all the classic questions they asked. Okay, and they reduced and they actually came out with Nano. Okay, it's a different story. Nano didn't sell. Okay, but I think the intention is very well taken. And the inspiration for this came from the user, watching the users, right? Okay, so so if you look at it, uh, this is typically a user-driven design process. That means you have an issue, okay, you do some research to understand the users, okay, and identify their real needs, okay, and then you go on to creating concepts, and based on the concept that you develop, that you choose to develop, you develop technology, and then it goes into building a business. Okay, so this is one way we do it. It's a typical design process, not necessarily, one after another, but you go through the whole process itself. Okay, so if you look at it, we can call this a user-driven design process, okay, or user-centered design process. Okay, so let's look at the other side. Okay, how in real world what happens. Okay, so this is 3M. They were actually developing. It's a technology company. They were developing, gums for sticking things, and in their experimentation, they realized they have actually discovered a new type of gum which doesn't really dry up. Okay, so if you apply it on paper, the paper would stick to things and would leave no mark, and you can actually take it off. Okay, so they thought that this has a great application. Okay, so they said, where would I use this? So they brainstormed and all that. Yeah, wherever you need to leave some marks for a temporary basis, teachers can use it. You can use it to pass on memos, and that's how the sticky notes was born. If you look at it, they fitted users to design and technology they had developed, right? So if you look at it here, the users came much later on. Okay, so it's wrong of us to think that the user-driven design process is the only one. The other one also exists in the industry. Okay, so let's look at another example of it. Okay, when the mapping became a very nice application, okay, so when the mapping got introduced by Google, Google actually made it popular. They bought up the technology from somebody else. But it was really good because you can locate another place on this map. Okay, and it would help in the beginning for if you're driving somewhere there, it would actually show you the direction to reach there. Okay, but also people realize that it can actually show the location of two things. Okay, two needs. Okay, and if you look at it, okay, it can show the location of the client who needs the services of a transport, and it can connect it to the transportation hub itself. Okay, so the technology actually enabled this. Okay, and they fitted it into the users, right? And Uber and Ola have become big success stories. Okay, so much so that now we're all thinking, do I really need to own a vehicle, especially if I'm living in a city? I mean, I can just take one of these services, okay, on a daily basis and reach to places that I can, right? So the ownership of the vehicle itself has been questioned. And of course, if you look at it, the Ola, for example, have co-opted the other forms like the auto rickshaw have co-opted it. So there's a big network of people who actually do their earnings through these services. Okay, so if you look at it, this technology, it's the business, okay, and the technology which is actually fitted in the user to certain extent. Okay, so we can call this the business-driven design process. So you start with a business plan, okay, because of the technology, and then you develop technology. So when Uber thought of it, uh, the technology was tweaked to suit its business plan of connecting client and the transport. Okay, and of course they had variations of it because it's different in different countries. And of course it created a need, and yeah, all of us slowly realized that Ola is actually a much nicer thing to do, especially if I'm going to another city, I can rely on them. And the users got fitted into this particular system. And you'll see that a whole lot of businesses are actually followed this model. Okay, so just wanted to say that both of them exist. Okay, I studied design in 1975 at IIT Bombay. That's where I came to do my master's, and this is the design model that we learned actually in 1969. You looked at a problem, you did data collection, you went to the users. Like I remember, the smallest class exercise was redesign of a mixer. So we had to at least go and talk to three families, especially the housewives who use these mixers, to get to know and understand what the issues and problems are. We came back to the classes and analyzed these, okay, looked for opportunities for design. Based on that, we developed new concepts of mixers, okay, and did prototyping or mock prototypes, okay, and that probably would go into a business later on, okay. So if you look at it, the problem statement is very small, but you have to actually, go very wide. You have to expand, right? In your research, you have to dig all holes that are possible. And when you analyze it, it becomes a little better in terms of structure. From that, you pick and choose and form concepts. You have to think of many concepts. Okay, out of that, you actually end up choosing one of them, or combining two of them or three of them into one. And then you say that, okay, let's go with that. Okay, so this is the typical design process. Okay, and our school, the IDC school, was based on the UL model, okay, which also did this to a certain extent. Okay, so let's look at it. Let's look at what did Ulm say. Ulm didn't have typically a diagram of what they used to do, but they meant what they said. Okay, so let me read this out. It pioneered the integration of science and art, which is a very interesting thing they did. They brought in thinking to design, thereby creating a teaching of design based on a structural problem solving approach. It was a structured problem solving approach. That means that the problem solving is not just they say you just go somewhere and think of a solution, but you actually try to analyze what the problem was. And it had reflections on the problems of use by people. The people were very important. You also have to have knowledge of material and production process. You have to have methods of analysis. in the beginning, and then synthesis, you combine it together, and you have to look for alternatives. Okay, and there was emphasis on scientific and technical disciplines, especially if you're doing product design or factors where you're making use of technology. It also says the consideration of ergonomics. Ergonomics is the study of human behavior, especially human anatomy. Okay, and the integration of aesthetics, the understanding of semiotics. Semiotics is communication, and a close academic relationship with the industry. They also connected with the industry. Okay, so this is what World School did in 1953. Okay, and 1964, Bruce Archer is a teacher. Okay, and he brought out a book called as the Design Methods. It's a classic book. Okay, which kind of outlined the design process that we follow actually. If you look at it, it had an analytical phase, followed by a creative phase and a phase for executing it. Okay, he called it as programming and data collection. In our time also, 1974, we actually, when we went to the field, we said we are collecting data. Okay, analysis was there. After analysis, you synthesize that into design opportunities. You developed it. That was the creative phase. And then you communicated it through a presentation or things like that. Okay, so this is a design process by Bruce Archer. Okay, and if you look at it, this is what we followed, which I just explained a little bit before that. But let me bring in a couple of more points which are really, really important in this whole process. Okay, of course, we have problem, research, analysis, concept, development, business, which is the way it goes about. In each one of them, in the problem, you actually try to identify the problems or define it. It's also called as need finding. Sometimes it's called as a brief that you can get from your client. Okay, so that's actually identifies the problem. Once you do that, you go through a phase of understanding and building a worldview. That means you need to know everything there is to about this particular problem space. Okay, so three things are important. The users become important. In which environment does this product or media happen? Okay, the kind of artifacts which are influenced by that. Okay, so people, products, and environments are very, very important. Use methods of analysis, you do visualization techniques, and you build insights and create design opportunities. Then you do ideation and concepts, and you start prototyping it, ends up as product development, and finally as an industry. This is one of the processes, okay? But there are some things which are happening on the top and bottom, which are very, very important. One of the things is called as participative, okay, and iterative. Both are extremely key in important things. One is that can you involve the users, participate in your design process to give you feedback at different points of time, okay? So when you're doing the concepts, you can go to the users and get a feedback from them, okay? And if you got bad feedback, you have time to improve it. When you actually done the prototype, you can actually have the users come and test this prototype and give you feedback. So there's again an opportunity to go back and actually redesign it. So the participative part of the users is a very, very important part of the design process. And as I said, you should be willing to change it. Okay, so iterative means do it again and again and again, depending on the feedback that you get. So that's actually part of the design process, which is a very important part of it. Okay, how do you do it? Okay, so that is written here. Okay, can you cooperate with your friends to put it together? Okay, can you collaborate? You need to have engineers, you have to have marketing people, okay, you have to have the design people, okay, you have to have the managers, you have to have the workers. Can you have a collaborative way of doing it? Okay, and you'll see that it's also become interdisciplinary. It's not a one-man shit show, okay? It needs a lot of skills from different people. So can you also combine and do it together? And it emphasizes on group work as against individual work, okay, to put it together. Okay, so this looks like the way industry has taken to it. Okay, they find this model as a very, very good model. Of course, at the same time, the individualistic model also exists. Sometimes they are successful. Okay, but we have to realize that in the larger context, this model holds good. Okay, so 1990s. Okay. Uh, Damien Newman did this squiggle very nicely to explain what he meant by a design process. He was working for an organization, and he said that, my sketch actually kind of says what I'm supposed to say. If you look at it, you in the beginning it's hazy, you're uncertain, you don't know what it is. Okay, and when you do design research, which is the second part of it, it becomes a bit more clearer. Okay, so you go through, the synthesis phase where you combine things together. Okay, and then you try out options. Okay, and then you become clear on it, and then you do the product development, which is a single line. Okay, so focus of design-driven innovations. Okay, so that's the first part of it, and focus in terms of clarity is the second part of it. But I think what we all know as the way of working on design is very nicely captured by this diagram called the squiggle, right? And in 2004, there was a big revamp of the design scenario in the UK, and the Design Council in UK played a very important role. They also took on, something called as the double diamond, okay, design process, and they actually promoted it. Okay, so it's launched in 2004. So he says the first part is the discover part of it, where you have insights into a problem and you try to focus on it. In the second part of it, you try to understand. This is what we say is trying to understand through design opportunities. Okay, and then you develop the potential solutions. That's the creative part of it, and then you deliver it as solutions. So this is very briefly put together. The same thing Dan Nessler actually tried to detail it out. If you look at it, it's got a lot of details inside that. It's still the double diamond. Okay, if you look at it, activity phase, the questions, challenge, client brief, then you go unstructured research findings, where you have primary research, secondary research, cluster the topics, okay, then themes, clusters, insights, opportunity areas. Okay, it's converging now. It was diverging before. Again, you diverge because you need to ideate and think of different concepts. So you have sets of ideas, you develop it. Okay, and then again you converge back again because you can only develop one of them. So you do prototype, test it, iterate it, build, test. Okay, and then finally it is made into a product. Okay, IDEO, again, if you look at it, there's a very big similarities. Okay, they put out this model. Again, you see diverge, converge, which is also part of the double diamond here. Okay, so they call it as the inspiration stage. That's the part A of the design process. Uh, uh, Next phase is the ideation phase, and the third phase is the implementation phase. Okay, so this is popularized about 10 years back. Okay, so each one is very nicely said. Inspiration, what is the design challenge? How do I get started? How do I conduct, talk to my user through an interview? How do I stay human-centered? Okay, user-centered, that's the word we are talking about. Okay, and look at second phase is ideation. How do I interpret what I've learned? How do I turn these into tangible ideas? How do I make prototypes? Okay, the last phase is how do I make my concept real? How do I do these details? How do I know make it work? Can I look at sustainability? Yeah, these are the some questions which are asked. Okay, so this is the design process by IDEO, and then came the D school. Okay, and they call this as the design thinking process. Okay, so again, interesting. What they've done is, if you look at it, they've kind of shifted the focus, but it still fits into the overall design process model itself. Okay. Uh, If you look at it, the first part is a very important part of it. Okay, so they called it as empathize. Okay, so that means you're building empathy with the user. Okay, and they talked about a lot of techniques to do that. Okay, so interviews, shadowing is actually following the user, understanding the user, being non-judgmental. Okay, you're not an expert, but you're a learner in the whole process. Okay, okay, so next phase is defining it. So then you create personas. What are the decisions? What are the challenges? They also talked about what are the difficulties that you have as called as pain points. Okay, comes to the phase of ideation. That's the third, hexagon here. Share ideas. Are all ideas worthy? Okay, you diverge and converge to select ideas. S and thinking. Okay, so there's no here. Okay, and prioritize what you thought of. And then you build prototypes through mock-up storyboards, try to keep it simple, iterate quickly, and then finally you test it out, what works. Okay, so this is roughly, and it got very heavily popularized. Okay, so in fact, now it's called as the design thinking process, right? All of us are talking about it. Okay, so this is in a nutshell. Okay, now since this is very important, I thought that let's look at it. Let's also try to compare the two. Okay, what was before and what happened after. Okay, if you look at it, a lot of them are almost similar. Okay, the identifying the problem was there, in which you actually learned about the user. But here's which straight away goes on to focus on users. Okay, with the you use of the word empathize, which means that you have to get into the shoes of the user in some sense. Okay, and you have to be, kind and tender, or to the problems somebody else is facing. Okay, so that's a very important aspect of design thinking. Okay, the next phase is really the research part of it, where it was called as data collection, where you're trying to understand the problem space. Okay, here it says challenge notions and what do you get inspired from. Okay, and the third phase here is understanding the problem space, where you did the analysis of the information that you got, trying to create opportunities for design. It's almost the same here, redefine problems and define it. Okay, explore alternative concepts, that the creative phase of it. Here it's called as experimentation and exploration, ideation, build mock-ups and forms giving, which is the prototyping phase. Here also prototyping, developing it, testing and feedback, testing and feedback. So some of them are similar, but almost, I mean, there's nothing like saying you have to follow the design thinking process or the old good old design process itself. Okay, I think both actually, if you look at it, lead on to the same thing. They're trying to make you, become aware of the users. The focus is out there, and then you use a whole lot of methods to actually come to a final solution. Okay, we can go into details of it. Okay, so if you look at it, this is the detail of design thinking. Okay, you have the 5 stages. Okay, if you look at details, you have to do research, study, observe, take decisions, share ideas, then do prototype and test it. And of course, you can use tools. Okay, this is what we learn in design schools. Okay, methods of interviewing, how to interview, how to form questions, what to talk about. Can we actually ask them to narrate instead of asking questions? Okay, the concept of shadowing, it means follow and observe people at work. Map activities. Okay, stage 2, you have personas. Create personas means these are the kind of people who we are looking at. You look at pain points, problems that are issues that needs to be solved. Okay, you can use methods of brainstorming and sketching for ideation, yeah, prototype techniques and testing it out. Okay, and if you go to the old design process, okay, so research and analysis, concepts, prototype develop. Again, you'll find need finding. We have primary and secondary research. Primary means go to the user, okay, and do user studies. Yeah, secondary research is what you get from the internet, from the books, from experts. Okay, you do many techniques, you put them together, you look for affinities between the different points that you got, you draw insights from this, and you note down what are the opportunities for design over there, create alternatives. It goes through a process of ideation, iteration, experimentation, exploration. Finally, you develop the prototype and get feedback, and of course, you need to do detailing at the end. Okay, and even here, we used tools, lot of tools. Interview was a tool, contextual inquiry, which the human-computer interaction design has put in together. Focus groups is a typical social sciences method for understanding the needs. Okay, we use visual mappings. Okay, you can do a mind map, you can do a concept map. You build scenarios, you build stories on how this can happen. You create personas. Okay, in terms of ideation, you can do brainstorming and sketching. Sketching, of course, is very, very important. Rapid sketching. Okay, mock-ups. There's a concept of soft prototype using just paper and things which are very easy to make a prototype. You try to create a proof of concept, get it evaluated, and then do tailing, and then go into the business plan. Okay, so this becomes uh, the technique. Okay, so let's go on to again, focus on users. Okay, what are the different techniques, in this whole period that we have developed? Okay, and I think you had inputs into ethnography in your last couple of sessions, so I'm not going to go into it. So it's understanding again people. Okay, this is also about in the 1950s after the war came in, especially because there were a lot of accidents which were caused because the controls were in the wrong places on a fighter jet. Okay, so it also became that they were building these, you know, big powerhouses where there were a lot of controls and a lot of things, and so the controls were important to be done such that the human being actually is able to configure it, right? He doesn't become confused, but actually it helps him to take decisions. Okay, so they realize that that human capability is something that they need to understand properly. That means visually through your senses, visually, physically through your hands. Okay, you have capabilities, and everything that you design has to fit in to that capability. And the science of ergonomics was born. It's also called as human factors. So that is basically a study of human beings, okay, and the capabilities to do certain actions, okay, and it became a very, very important field, okay, especially in design of products and systems, right? Also came as people and crowd watching. That's a term used. So it's, I think last time you got used to the word that fly in the wall, right? You are an observer of people. You actually observe how people do certain activity. It could hold for people or for a larger group like a crowd. Okay, and then of course, if you looked at it, the beginning of Industrial Revolution, the objects were very, very ugly to look at. Okay, and so they used a very nice term, humanizing technology. Okay, you make the technology suited to the humans. Okay, instead of it being the other way around, and thus was born the human-centered design. Okay, so you focus your design on human beings. Okay, and also in the 80s, the computer science came in. Okay, and computers were born, right? And to interact with a computer was very, very difficult because in the earlier phase, the computers needed to be interacted only through a language, understanding of a language. It was very slowly that the user interface, especially the graphic user interface, came in. And even after the graphic user interface came in, they needed to co-opt all people to start using the computers. So it has to be made as easy as possible. So they realized that programmers don't understand the people who are using it. So there's need to be a separate, subject called as the trying to connect the computer interaction with humans, and that's how the human-computer interaction as a subject came in. Okay, and now it has resulted into something called as the user experience. That means that you need to look at when you do an activity, especially on the computing, okay, the person who actually uses it needs to have a good experience of using it. He needs to be able to understand the interface itself, and it should not put him off into doubts and things like that. So this whole area called as user experience came in. Okay, and of course, it centered on user-centered design. So that's the term we are talking about. So if you look at it, we've gone a long way from from a very macro, big picture to coming down to nailing down to the particular subject that we are trying to understand now. Okay, understanding this also was very important. And how did they do it? The old school did it through this. Okay, they tried to understand a need through its users. Okay, so they looked at how users actually make use of it, how they live in this particular environment, and what are the objects they actually presently use. So if you want to remodify or come out with a new product, you actually, the context was very, very important to them. Okay, and they very clearly said there are two types of understanding that you do. One through secondary research. That means you look at existing information sources through literature, or you look at what experts have said. You look at journals and publications, and of course now we look at the internet as the first stop. You look at case studies like DSource, for example, dsource.in. If you can actually look at it, it's got over 300 case studies, especially Indian case studies connected with design, which can give you inputs into how to go about solving problems. Okay, and of course, very importantly, you need to do primary research. Primary research is nothing but actually going to the actual users. So that means user and environment understanding. You do field studies, you do observation, you do interviews, you talk to them, you document these interactions. Yeah. So this is the old school method. And yeah, about 12, 13 years back, IDEO brought out this set of interactions that can do that one can do with users to understand them better. They call them by interesting names. First, of course, we had people watching, right? They had a name for it. It was called as shadowing, but nothing. It's basically observing people at their work. But the people are not conscious that you're actually observing them. Okay, so they could do, they go about their work naturally. Okay, you should document them. Okay, either through sketching, or if you have a camera, can you do that? Or if you have a video, can you do that? Okay, so that they called it as behavioral mapping. Okay, you can actually look at the consumer journey, because most of the activities take a period of time to do. Okay, and they interact with many things. It's not just one object per se, but it's something which happens across a period of time. So the space and time are very important criteria. So tracking their interactions become important. Okay, and lastly, this is everybody would have a story to tell about their activity. It could be an incident, it is something that they remember from your memory. So normal interviewing techniques won't give that. But if you ask them to narrate their experiences and form the story, you'll actually end up with many such stories, which might actually become very insightful while trying to solve them. Okay. So again, very nice names: shadowing, behavioral mapping, consumer journeys, user stories. That's the way to understand users or user experience by IDEO. Okay, so let's look at human-computer interaction research. Okay, this was primarily, first uh, aimed at computer science graduates, those programmers, right? And they actually sat in the office and did programming. They never went into the field. They never went into understanding who the actual people who are actually using what they program for. Okay, so it was very important for computer science to introduce this particular subject, because it actually connected computer science with the actual use of computer science, with the people who used it. Okay, so So they adopted many techniques which were actually from social sciences, but they gave it new names. So yeah, so one of them is ethnography study techniques. If it is a long and field that you don't know of, it is in a different faraway place, you need to do this. Okay, contextual inquiry is that instead of sitting in your office and trying to get everything, go to the place where the activity is happening. Okay, so if you want to, for example, change, let's say, Adobe Photoshop and make it better, you're a competitor, let's say. Okay, so you'll actually, sit behind the person who's looking at, who's trying to use Adobe Photoshop and find out what his issues are, what his problems are, where he gets stuck, where he's really good at doing it. Okay, so when they're doing their work, you're actually talking to them and observing them and noting down, taking down notes. Okay, so that's actually contextual inquiry. You go to the place, okay, and do it. Focus groups is you call a set of groups somewhat connected with the subject that you're trying to form, start a conversation between them, okay, and that leads to some form of research, okay, at the end of it, because each one of them will give their own point of view. They'll build upon each other's sayings. Yes, so that's this. Fly in the wall is what we looked at as shadowing. It's a silent observer, and the person being observed doesn't know if he's actually being or she being observed. Okay, so that's the fly in the wall technique. Heuristics or expert view is you actually note down all the usability issues with regard to a particular issue, whether it's a, let's say, a writing program or a banking software, and then you evaluate it. Okay, so that's the heuristic method of doing. Usability studies is once you have the product at hand, okay, and you look for how efficient it is, how accurate it is, how do you relate to it. Once you have the product, you can do usability studies. Okay, and there are some simple techniques. Okay, so for example, the product that you're doing might be suited for 1 million population. Now, when you say 1 million population, you don't know who they are, how they are. Okay, so it might be easy to create a persona saying that, okay, she's actually a teacher who has to go to school every day in the morning. And before going to school, she has to actually prepare breakfast or lunch and give it to all her kids. And then her school is, half an hour from her home. And then she comes back in the evening and does this. So you kind of know the personality of the person who's actually making use of it. Okay, so that's an important part of it, understanding the users. Of course, you can create narratives, okay, or scenarios. Okay, especially you thought of a new idea. How do you actually convey this idea? Okay, do I just show that product and say, okay, this does this, this has these norms, and do it? But let's say I put it in the hands of my actual user, saying that this is Ram, okay, trying to use this new mixer, and he's actually showing it to Sita, his wife, okay, and how to make use of it, okay, and yeah, so she kind of through this conversation and demonstration, you come to know what this new mixer is and how it can actually do the job, which becomes very easy for one to understand the whole technique of it. So that's the part I ended part here. Okay, so these are attitudes at the end of it. If you happen to be a designer who uses this design process, okay, some of the good things that you can think of. First is it's always good to work in teams, especially if the teams are made out of different disciplinary members. Okay, so it even makes sense to have a engineer, a, a somebody who's done graphic design to a marketing person sit together and conceive of a new idea. Okay, and as against individual efforts, it's always good to have group efforts. You sit together in groups. Also, you work together. Your efficiency becomes more. So, group inquiry and ideation is something that becomes part and parcel of it. Okay. Uh, Third is a very, very important thing, especially because we are doing user-centered design. Can I bring the user at different points of the design process so I can get his feedback? understand user is not the designer. You are the designer, but you use the user to give you good inputs on what you're designing. Okay, that they are highly capable of. Okay, if you show your sketches, they can give you inputs. If they show you mock-ups, they can give you inputs. If you do show them the prototype, they can try it out and tell you what's wrong or what's good about it. Okay, and because of this, you go through an iterative design process. So there's nothing like, oh, I've done the design, that's it. Okay, that doesn't work. If you get a bad response to it, go back and try to change it. Okay, and it's very nice if you can actually use mapping techniques. Okay, visualization techniques. Sketching is one of the simplest of them all. Okay, if you sketch your idea, you know, 5 people can discuss it. They can add on to it. If it's only in your head and you try to explain it, it's very tough for people to actually visualize it. So sketching is, it need not be a very good drawing. It has to be a sketch which explains. Okay. Sometimes extension of the sketching is a project space itself. You create a small space. It could be a 10 feet by 10 feet space. You pin up everything connected with your project. Okay. So if you go into the room, you're enveloped by the problem that you're trying to solve. It's very easy to see the solution when you see the alternatives in front of you. Okay. And last but not the least is that designers have this conviction that what they're doing, because when they start doing, it's an unknown territory. Okay. So you have to have that conviction and belief that what you're doing will finally come out into something better than what it was before. And in that sense, you need also involvement in the design process. Okay, so these are what I say as the work fundamentals at the end of it. Okay, I close this with a statement from Dashrath Patel. He's no more, but he was a great designer, sculptor, and teacher. He taught at NID for quite some years, and then he was an independent designer. Okay, never let any established system constrain your imagination and pursuit of what you believe in. If you can dream it, you can make it happen also. Very nicely said. Okay, so I think it's a very important thing. Okay? So now I have, it's already 5 o'clock. So I have about 20 minutes of, case studies. So let's go through it. Some are very old projects. Okay. Okay, so I want to bring them in. Okay, and show you case studies. There's a long case study also. Okay, some are usually. So when IDC started, we said that, IDC is very socially committed. And even now, students do 2 projects. We encourage at least one of the projects to be a socially relevant project that they should do. One they can take up typically an industry-led project, but the other one we say that try to pick up a project which makes sense, which is contextually important. Okay, so this is 1969. Okay, when IDC started. See, look at the kind of projects they looked at. Okay, they looked at the construction workers. This lady takes this gamela and puts bricks or cement on that and carries it in her head and goes, okay, I'm not going to change much of it, but can I change the shape of the gamela to be ergonomically such that it fits on your head nicely? You can hold it nicely. It's comfortable to hold. And even though it's a small difference, you can't change the way construction workers might change right now, but at least can I make an intervention at the product level? Okay, so that's the design of gamela. You can see the alternatives and the final one, the lady carrying on her head. Okay, so this is when, in popular, we don't actually notice this product, right? The shoe shine box. Okay, at that time it was okay for children to do it. Now I know it's not okay. Again, 1970, when this was done, Suhas Kakde, under the guidance of Professor Natkani. So he made something with pockets in them, easy to carry, easy to put forward. The shoes also, when somebody puts his foot, it's easy to shine it. Okay, doesn't cost much at all. Okay, and so it's a better product than just carrying a wooden box with all the things together, right? Yeah, so this was that. Professor A.G. Rao, coal, uh, stoves were very popular, and they used to give a lot of smoke and not so efficient. Okay, so he thought of something which can be produced at the village level. If there's a welding shop, okay, they can actually make these things. So it's meant to be not produced in the city and transported to somewhere else, but wherever there's a small industry, they can actually make it. By the way the holes were given, it was very efficient, and it increased its efficiency by almost about 40%, and also much more comfortable to do your cooking. Okay, so this is an energy efficient coal chula. Okay. Now, of course, now we are discouraging people to use coal itself because it's become a dear, scarce, commodity. Uh, Professor Balram looked at the Indian rider. Okay, the Western cycle, which is meant for pants, is not so suited, right? And also, many of these people carry a lot of weight on them. Okay, so if the weight is lower, the balance is better. Okay, so of course you can talk about it, but yeah. So this is a redesign of a bicycle. Both if you're wearing a sari, males and females, both the genders can make use of it. Okay. Uh, yeah, so that's the bicycle for rural areas and urban areas conceived by Professor Balram. So look at this intervention. Okay. So this is the design of a bird house. Okay, so it's meant to be kept in your garden so that the birds can come and make it a home. Okay, and yeah, so you saw the concerns, right? So this is a concern for life on Earth. Okay, so it's an extension of what we do as a design to other beings, done again in the 1980s, brought home by Professor Natkani. This is was my, we do two projects. The first project I did was actually design of crutches. So till then, there were only wooden crutches. So I'm talking about 1976. Okay, so I worked with a agency. Where it's the government body which makes these wooden crutches. It was in Mumbai city itself. I helped them to get on to aluminum, make use of aluminum to do the crutches, and then I developed a mechanism through which actually they can actually go up the staircase. Basically, there's a T section which holds onto the staircase, so he's stable. He doesn't need a railing really to go up. And look at this person; he's actually coming down the staircase without holding onto the side. Yeah, so that was that. Then again in 1980s, I came back as a faculty at IDC, and then there was a problem space that I wanted to work in. This was the problem space of public hospitals, especially in Mumbai city. People come from different areas and they cannot actually identify the different facilities in the hospital. So we did a whole methodology based on the signage being actually participatory designed or developed based on the inputs from the users. So, for example, one of the things I did was first I went to the people who are waiting their turn in the hospitals and asked them, their, keywords on, let's say, what a operating theater is. They used to say, well, what do you think is there in the operating theater? They used to say, okay, the white dress, big lights. Where did they see it? They've seen it in the movies. Have you been to an operating theater? No, but I have this vision in me. So we wrote down all those keywords. So it was very, slowly developed by inputs from the users, and then we got inputs from the designer team. We compared it to other symbols around, and then we developed it and we implemented it. Of course, now after the internet came in, it's a part of the open source initiative, so anyone can actually, use these vector images and implement it. Okay. uh, uh, quite a recent project, about 10 years old, by the student Aniket. He went to villages to study what the issues are, and he located one in the when he went and saw the village schools. Village schools typically don't have a place, right? I mean, they don't have any desks, so all the students sit on the floor. It's a large room. Do it. So he thought that, see, if desk has a lot of advantages because when you want to write and draw things, you need a firm surface. So can I do something which the child can actually take it home? And it also becomes their backpack. Okay, so he can put it all these things on his back, and he goes home. And so when he goes home, he actually carries with him. Okay, so this is a furniture for school, personal furniture, because he's actually taking it home. Okay, and yeah, so that's few, examples from projects done at IDC and few from NID. Okay, so I'm taking you through a project where it's a 3-week project that we do with the students. Okay, they immerse into this project. They work about 15 days on this. We encourage them, like I said, a group of students working together to solve a problem. Okay, here actually we gave them the user group and we gave them a rough topic. Okay, and sorry, they selected the user group. The topic was actually design of an interactive system or device for structuring, remembering, and sharing for underserved communities. Okay, the computer had just come in. Okay, so this is a project done about 15 years back. Okay, so the internet had come in, but then computing had come in, but it was not available to a whole lot of people. Okay, so can you make this system suited for them? That was the broad area that we had given. And so the team that worked on this was Prabhat. He had an electronics background and he was pursuing product design at IDC. Mushir came from a computer science background and he was doing visual communications at IDC. And Parul was a product designer. She was trying to do product design and she came from an architecture background. Okay, so you have this mix of 3 students who did this particular project. This is the problem statement we give them. They actually chose elderly. Why did they choose it? Because they said, all of them had good memories of their grandfather, grandmother. Okay, they could relate to them easily. And their presumption was that they were deprived of new technological advances. Okay, so maybe what we are trying to do will fit their, very nicely. So the first part of it, they wanted to, we had given them a problem statement. So you break down this problem statement into components. So they looked at the sensories, which are important as you grow old because they become inefficient. Looked at the environment in which they stay. Who are these user groups? Okay. Okay, and how do you make something interactive? Okay, and we had said it should be able to share, you should be able to structure the information, you should have access to different medias. Remembering is an issue with the elderly. So they did brainstorming in the beginning, okay, just to familiarize themselves with the topic. He also did a mind mapping of this with the elderly in the center, the environment, structuring media, sharing, remembering interaction. So you kind of broaden the area. So you know that I need to actually look at many of these aspects. Okay, and they're all considerations. So they said, okay, let's look at elderly 60 plus, typically middle class family. They're physically and functionality may be low, but mentally very active. May or may not be with the children, which is a typical thing because of the nuclearization of families, and reasonably conversant with technology. So these were the broad first specifications they started with. Okay, and they went and did user studies. They went to these people that they were all in different parts of Mumbai. Okay, so they went to their homes to talk to them to understand what their needs and their interactions with technology, what they thought of it, how familiar are they with using gadgets, things like that. Okay, so this were the inferences after analysis. Some of the inferences are communication with family members is very important to them. Okay, they would like to share their experiences. They have a lot of time. How do you make use of it effectively? They also try to look at other people who are like them. Okay, and they have a big urge to help out others, and they have a time so they can do this. Okay, so they're familiar with TV, mobiles, etc., but learning computers, they said, was a bit difficult. It's not that easy to get onto computers. So these were the first inferences from the study. They also tried to map out what are the uh, things, especially both tangible and intangible things which elderly is surrounded with. Okay, so you look at elderly, photos make a big difference to them. They're surrounded with books. They have some artifacts, gifts. Watches are important. Spectacles, many of them have. At that time, radio was a good companion. They preserve their certificates, jewelry, they maintain a dairy. Many of them, umbrella is like a companion they take, right? So, and of course, if you look at the intangible aspect of them, they have memories to share. Uh, you know, Ladies have a lot of recipes that they can talk about. They always remember things. Okay, they are wise and they have knowledge. They have stories to tell or lullabies. They also do the prayers and good at riddles and anecdotes, right? Yeah, so this is their world. And one thing the group realized also that they were studying the Indian elderly, and they realized that they're kind of little different from elsewhere. So it was very important to pen down what the Indian context was. Okay, so if you look at elderly in India, they're looked upon for their wisdom, knowledge, and sharing of experiences. Many communities, you still have a lot of respect for the elderly. Yeah, you look after them. Community itself looks after them, and they take the pride of place in occasions and events. Respect is shown towards the elderly by touching their feet. We all do it. Family bonds are strong and obligations are deeply rooted. Okay, so this is also a very, very important factor. Frankness is expected from the younger generation, but it's not the other way around. No, the elderly won't be frank to youngsters. Yeah, and in India, it's very interesting. A lot of people look forward to growing old. It's like the second life. They worked all their life. Now it's time for me to relax and do things that I couldn't do. So they kind of look forward to that. And yeah, yeah, if given the health is all right, yeah, then they actually end up doing it. Okay, so both based on these, insights and statements for opportunities, they looked at and they came out with devices to help them in remembering. Okay, devices to help communicate with family members and building up community. So they thought of different ideas. Okay, and they had quite a lot of ideas, and they went, and I'm showing few of them here, went to the users and got feedback from them. Okay, so this is how you get them to participate in the process of design. They gave the comments, they said good things to say, bad things to say, put together all that. They had to come and rethink their solution. Okay, so it was very important that the whole thing becomes integrated. So the first iteration was something like that. So they thought that there'll be swatches to be placed on indoor objects, so we can always find them if they are misplaced. There are swatches for outdoor use, so that if you leave something in an outdoor place like your umbrella or your wallet, it tells you left it. Okay. Swatches which can record something, because many people forget what they remembered. So it's important to just recite and keep it, and you can transfer it to a device, community board, or at your home at some point of time. Yeah, so that was the one is the community one is the small one with recorded memos into it. Okay, so they worked on it, and then they said the best way to explain the final design is through a scenario. So the elderly person is Prabhakar, so it's in his footsteps. This particular scenario is okay. So he's sitting at home here and wondering what's playing at the Nati Mandir tonight. If it's possible, he said, I want to go and see the play. Okay. And as usual, he's forgotten his spectacles, he's misplaced it. I need to read the newspaper. So where are they? Okay, so yeah, his grandson realizes that he's misplaced his glasses again, didn't you? But then the grandfather says, don't worry, Chintu, you don't have to look for them today because I've got Smaran. Okay, so he takes out his Smaran now. So the Chintu is wondering, what the hell is this? Okay, and so he says, what's this cool thing, Grandpa? And the grandpa presses a button on Smaran and it goes beep, beep. And Chintu runs to find where the sound is coming from. And yeah, he goes there and finds the glasses. Okay, so now I have to go hunting for my misplaced items, right? So that's the way to find his glasses or things that is misplaced. Okay, he finds out Natarajan is playing in the Nat Mandir and he wants to go there. But it's also good to go with somebody for the play. Okay, so he says that let me find out who will come with me. So afternoon, Chintu goes to school in the afternoons. He takes the afternoon shift. So yeah, usually the grandfather goes with him till the bus stop and walks back. So now he has a message to leave on the community board. Okay, so he speaks into this device. Okay, and says that looking for somebody to accompany me to the play at the Natya Mandir tonight. You can call me on this number, Mr. Prabhakar, and he transfers it onto the community board. So it becomes a message on the community board, okay, which allows him to do it. On the way, they have the ice cream shop. So yeah, so usually Chintu is always looking for a treat. Anyway, so grandfather says, okay, we both will have ice creams today. Okay, yeah, and then yeah, decide on what ice cream. Yeah, one vanilla and one chocolate. Okay, I want a strawberry. Say it goes on. So finally, the orders and they, when they step out of the shop, there's a buzzing sound on the counter, right? Grandpa, your wallet's ringing. Is there a phone in it? Okay. So then, no, son, the sound is coming from a wallet. Smaran lets me, never lets me forget my wallet anywhere. Okay. So there's a piece of Smaran inside the wallet. So that's how it's ringing. So he says again, cool grandpa, I wish I had something like that. And he leaves him in the bus stop. Okay, and okay, so we'll see in the evening. So on the way back, he says his smiling face on the community board where he had left the message. And Mrs. Pramila from the neighboring township has agreed that she'll come with him for the play. Okay, so yeah, he says, God bless the kids from IDC who installed this community board here. It's so much easier to find friends now, right? He goes back to the house smiling and finds the phone ringing. Okay, and there's phone from Pramila here. So they actually talk to each other and decide where to meet and then go to the play together. Okay, and yeah, that's what happens. Okay, now he tries to leave a message for his home because he's going to be a bit late for dinner. Okay, but he couldn't reach his son. His mobile was not being picked up. Okay, so he takes out Smaran again and leaves a message and sticks it on the refrigerator door. So when his son comes back, he can get the message. That's what happens when Sanjay, his son, returns home in the evening. He sees that he doesn't find his father at home, but he sees the Smaran ringing, and when he takes it, he says that he's gone to the play with Mrs. Prabhakar. So Yeah, so I'll come, sorry, Pramila, and yeah, and he'll be back a bit late, and he's very relieved. Okay, so that's roughly it. So if you look at it, the students have conceived of a character, a grandfather. Okay, and he's an independent grandfather. He takes his own decisions, like he wants to go, enjoy the play and come back, right? And he makes use of these new technologies to help him, because he forgets things. Yeah, it helps him do it. It helps him with his communication. Yeah, so in a nutshell, because you actually created a story, okay, it has actually told you what the product is. Okay, and if you look at it, the product started with an understanding of the user. Okay, so it's still trying to reach out to the people where it's supposed to be useful to them. Okay, so of course, it was a product. Product means form. Okay, this is the delightful exercise of exploring forms. Okay, and you can look for metaphors. They actually looked at Putlu as a metaphor. Okay, conceived of objects, did 3D modeling out of it. Okay, so they had the mother device and they had all the small objects now as part of a bigger family. Okay, so you had $1 for, you know, when you're outside the house, $2 for finding objects inside the house, $3 for inter-family communication, and the fourth one is for the community board. And they all go into this bigger form, okay, which one can actually put it into the pocket or to a bag and carry it around. Yeah, that's the rendered, messengers, forget-me-nots. They all fit into a family. Okay, so of course, when they did these prototypes, it was a mock-up prototype at this point of time, but conceptually they could explain it. They found the Potlu difficult to carry around. They said it should be more compact. It can't be as big as this. Okay, and they had mentioned actually personal security in the beginning brief, and they were very unhappy that using so much of technology, but the students had not addressed that part of it. Okay, so again, so if they had more time, they would have actually gone back. You got this feedback and redone their project to include something else which will help them with security. Okay, of course, if you look at this product itself, it can be extended to other user groups. It could be made more compact. It can create new community interactions. And of course, this is not the only form. You can think of different forms. So that's a thank you from the 3 students. Okay. So roughly that. Okay, so if you look at it, this is a short project, which is of three weeks duration, which kind of tells you, if you start with the focus on user, how to use a user-centered design process to solve the problem and come out with a solution. So I hope I've explained it to you. We started from a macro picture, uh, went into different aspects of design. We realized what is important for design, and user is one of the elements, one of the quadrants of the 4 quadrants. Yeah. And then we went into looking at what are the different, evolutionarily different models of the design process. We also compared the most popular design thinking process as against the traditional, design process. We looked at some case studies which were relevant to social design. And then we took up a case of design for the elderly. And it's a new technology being used, but the user-centered design is at the center of it. I hope all of you have got a gist of the whole talk. Okay, thanks so much for listening. Yeah, over to you, Manish.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू। जैसा कि सर ने भी बताया और हम लोग लगभग 1 hour 30 minutes से देख रहे हैं कि सर ने बहुत ही अच्छे तौर तरीके से ह्यूमन सेंटर्ड डिजाइन के पर्सपेक्टिव में चीजों को शुरू किया और कैसे जो अब तक के ग्रेट डिजाइनर्स रहे हैं, आर्टिस्ट रहे हैं, उनके कोटेशंस को लेके सोशल डिजाइन के रेलेवेंस में ऐड किया और बताया कि ये सारी चीजें जो हमारे आसपास की हैं, जिस पर्सपेक्टिव में हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं या ये कोर्स हो रहा है, वो कैसे रिलेवेंट होती हैं हमारे लाइफ से, हमारे सोसाइटी से। इसके अलावा सर ने फिर कुछ डिफिनीशंस बताई हम लोगों को सोशल डिजाइन के डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव में, और इसके साथ साथ बहुत ही अच्छी अच्छी केस स्टडीज की दिखाई, जो उनकी लाइफ जर्नी का भी रहा है और देश के प्रीमियर इंस्टीट्यूट इंडस्ट्रियल डिजाइन सेंटर का भी रहा है। तो सर आपका इस पूरे कार्यक्रम के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मेरे पास एक क्वेश्चन आया है, वैसे मैंने आपको व्हाट्सअप किया है। एक बहुत सिंपल सा क्वेश्चन है, मैं आपको पढ़ के सुना देता हूँ, और अगर पॉसिबल हो तो आप सर उसका आंसर दे दीजिएगा। एक सेकंड लगेगा सर। इसमें है सर कोई कि व्हाट इज सिंथेसिस इन डिजाइन प्रोसेस।
Okay, synthesis and design process is nothing but, when you when you start a problem, you diverge. Okay, you have to look at it from many points of view, right? You kind of, it's not, you have to expand. Okay, that's the initial part. Whenever you go to a field, or when you go and understand the users, you get so many inputs from this. Okay, and then once you have that, okay, there are two times you do that. Okay, and it's very nicely explained in the diamond part of it. Okay, so the first part is you have a lot of data. You have to, the first one is, opposite of synthesis. You expand it. Okay, then you actually have to analyze it. Okay, there might be 1,000 points you got, but maybe 10 points are important. So you have to prioritize it. So then what you do is you actually synthesize all the inputs you got into some things that is handleable. Okay, and again you go on the diverging thing. Okay, that is when you start doing your concepts. When you do your ideations, you don't think of one solution, you try to think of many solutions. Okay, so again you're diverging. After you're diverging, you have to again stop it and say which are the best ones out of that. You have to do the synthesis part of it. Okay, so you come down, and finally you come down to just one solution. Okay, that solution may be a combination of many, but you actually come down to finally saying, okay, this seems to be the best solution. Let me take it forward. Okay, so you do this, diverging and converging, right? Synthesis is nothing but another name for converging. Yeah, you're putting it together in some sense. Yeah, I hope you've understood this.
यस सर, थैंक यू फिर सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मुझे लगता है कि जिस पार्टिसिपेंट ने क्वेश्चन किया था, उसके साथ बहुत सारे और पार्टिसिपेंट्स को इसका आंसर मिल गया होगा। आप सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स का फिर से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। और सर अगर बच्चों को कुछ पार्टिसिपेंट्स को अगर कुछ वो एक्सरसाइज देनी हो या फीडबैक फॉर्म के लिए 100 वर्क्स का कुछ हो, तो आप बता देंगे तो थोड़ा सा अच्छा रहेगा।
Right. What we'll do, Manish, I think I didn't have time, so I'll do it by tomorrow. I'll send you. Yeah, I'll send you all the exercises. They'll enjoy doing it. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, participants. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.